Welcome, everybody. We are here back again. Today, we're going to be hosting this Thought Lab together with Dr. Alaina Szlachta, who's going to tell us a whole lot more about making measurement easier. I've seen her at doing her job, and she's got some really wonderful stuff happening and coming out soon too, I understood. So I'm super thrilled to give the floor to Alaina. Take it away.
Thank you, Stefan. I am happy to be here at the time that I thought was right for me. And I'm glad that so many of you have come back. I know that this will be a recorded session. And so others that couldn't attend now will be able to get this juicy conversation for themselves also. But thank you for being here. I love these kind of sessions because sometimes being in L&D or being in the learning sector, it kind of feels lonely. And so these are moments for us to come together and just kind of get in the weeds. And measurement is definitely something where we get in the weeds all the time. And we're like, somebody please help me. So my goal in our time together, whether you're here live or you're watching this later, is to make measurement and evaluation seem less overwhelming. That being said, because these are opportunities to get to know one another and hopefully stay connected after this hour, I would love for us just to get to know each other a little bit more by putting in the chat what time zone are you in? Because we're a global community. I'd love to know that. So put in the chat like, hey, I'm in Barcelona, or I'm in London. I happen to be in Austin, Texas, just so we can get a sense of who is here. And then the other piece, and this is part of the connection opportunity, is to put in chat what is your superpower? So if you had to pick one thing in the learning and development sector, what are you really, really good at that you're proud of? And then what's a skill that you would love to develop? Because this is what helps us to connect on LinkedIn or otherwise. Like, hopefully we can connect like, hey, Stefan has a skill I would love to develop. Let's connect and maybe continue a conversation. So skill, your superpower, and a skill you really want to develop. Go ahead and put those in chat. Wow, we have a truly global audience. Amazing. Prague, we have Germany, I have some Texas. Hello from Texas. We have Nashville, Switzerland. Wow, how amazing. Portugal, fantastic. Ooh, the superpower of memory. I want that superpower. And then developing conflict management. That's awesome. Teresa from Texas says project management savvy. Awesome. Let us know, Teresa, what skill you'd like to develop also. Nick, it looks like storytelling for influence, asking great questions. That's an amazing superpower, especially in the world of learning and development and measurement. Awesome. And storytelling. Well, I've got some people I know that can help you develop that skill, Nick. So let's connect on LinkedIn if you'd like to. We have a superpower of analysis. Love that. Totally appropriate for today's conversation. We have a superpower of coaching, agility and learning. Awesome. What are some things that you also want to develop? Share those things with us too. This chat will be available as part of the recording so that you can go back and see if there's anybody's superpowers that you want to connect with afterwards. Let's see, we have being tech savvy and looking to develop skills and generative AI for L&D. Oh, okay, I'm gonna find you after today's session, Oren, because I want that skill also. Maybe we can figure it out together. Very cool. So, Stefan, better tracking measurements over time. How appropriate. That's what we're here to do today. Very good. Analysis and storytelling. Awesome. Well, there clearly are some themes here when it comes to the superpower skills that you all have and some of the skills that you want to develop. So hopefully you'll find some new connections here today that you can continue beyond the time that we're together. Thank you for sharing. Keep sharing if you didn't get a chance to do so. The next thing that I want us to do, because of course we're talking about measurement and evaluation, I have two questions for you. And Stefan has a word cloud that allows us to see some themes in our answers here. But the first question is going to be, Why do we measure and evaluate? Okay, this might seem like stupid and rudimentary, but like, let's just kind of level set here for a little bit. Like, why do we measure and evaluate? You have 1,000 characters, don't go crazy, but we're looking for just some themes in terms of words. Why do we do this? Why do we care? Why do we measure and evaluate? And I think, Stefan, the word cloud starts automatically as soon as we get responses. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
very cool. I love technology. I mean, there's so many cool things that we can do these days that we just couldn't do 10 years ago. I love when it works and when it facilitates connection and conversation. So awesome. Why do we measure and evaluate? Oh, you know what? I think I have to put an answer in to see the results. That's one thing. Okay, let me add my answer. Okay, awesome. That helps. Adding your answer can allow you to see the word cloud. Amazing. Okay, so some themes that we're seeing in our answers here, not surprising: impact, ROI, change, worthwhile, understanding, accomplishment, good. I see iterations. Knowing that what we're doing is
Down as well a
worthwhile.
little bit. There's a lot of words happening here. If you just scroll down in that window just a little bit, because there's also learning, impact, success,
That's right.
assess,
Thank you.
a lot of growing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, not surprisingly, impact seems to be the impact and worthwhile. We have impact a couple of times, worthwhile a couple of times, assess, evaluate. So we have some synonyms with measurement and evaluation. Okay, awesome. All of this makes a lot of sense. Here's my take on why we measure and evaluate, just to kind of create a more simple, and a lot of this is going to come out in what you've shared. I believe there's only 2 reasons that we should measure and evaluate. One is to be able to show if we met our goals. So if someone mentioned assess, of course we see courses impacted. Like, did the learning and development that we put into the world, did it achieve its goals? How do we know? So measurement and evaluation gives us the information we need to know if we achieved our goals, why or why not, and hopefully what we can do about it for the future. The second thing is to continuously improve. Like, I believe that as learning and development experts, our goal is to be continuously improving. I mean, that's what learning and development is for, is developing continual opportunities to improve for our learners. So measurement and evaluation gives us information to continuously improve in our own product development. And for me, it's that simple: improvement opportunities, and did we achieve our goals? And so people talked about ROI, effectiveness, reaction, understanding. In some cases, the goal is we need to have a certain ROI. In other cases, we need to know that our program was effective. We need to know that we facilitated understanding. So the goal can look a lot of different ways, but we just want to know, did we meet the goal or not? So that's my sort of simplistic definition of why do we care? Why do we do this M&E stuff anyway? The second question is a little bit more personal, if we can put that one up. And that is, why is measurement and evaluation important to you? To you personally. So obviously we can make a business case for measurement and evaluation. We can say that measurement and evaluation is important for our industry. But at the end of the day, why is it important to you? And I'll share mine here out loud, but I'll also type it in so we can see the word cloud. I'm on this journey of facilitating workshops, and I'm writing a book on measurement and evaluation. I'm doing this because measurement and evaluation is something I believe will elevate our entire industry. If everybody is like commonly measuring and evaluating, and it's just kind of a standard thing and it's more accessible and easier, we can obviously show the value of what we do. And then when times get tough, we're not the first department to get laid off because our value is so clear, because we have such great measurement and evaluation strategies implemented. It's common, it's normal, it's intuitive. And I believe that's really important. So I'm going to go ahead and type that, and I want to see why it's important for you personally. All right, so we have improvement, to be effective in my role, to make sure that what I'm doing matters, it's as effective as it can be, to see the impact, to help people grow and develop. Feedback is, of course, super important. Value, quality assurance, yes. So the reason why it's really nice to be clear on why measurement and evaluation is important to you is because it's not easy. Sometimes we get stuck. Sometimes we don't have the perfect environment or the perfect resources or the time or the support that we need. And so we might have to kind of struggle a little bit with measurement and evaluation. But if it's really clear to you why it's important, then it helps us to get beyond those times when they're really, really tough. So if it's helpful, I have my little notepad right here. If you don't already have this sort of ingrained, like put on a sticky note, I am committed to measurement and evaluation because I believe in quality assurance. I want to know that my role is effective. I want to protect the salary that I have. I want to get a promotion, whatever it is, write it down in a sticky note and put it somewhere. And next time you feel in the weeds or stuck or overwhelmed with measurement and evaluation, look at that sticky note and be like, I got this. I really got this. And keep going. So that being said, let's move on to the next piece here. So I'd love to hear in chat, what are the challenges? If you just want to free for all, put in chat, what's really troubling you with measurement and evaluation right now? And I have a couple of things, some themes that I know from research and my own work, but I'd love to hear from you all. What's really happening for you with measurement and evaluation? What are the things that are making you feel stuck, stopped, held back? What are those challenges? Let's just kind of do a quick check-in here on where are you all at? Delphine, getting learners to fill out surveys. Yeah, that's a common one. You're not alone. What's troubling you? What else is going on? Where do you feel absolutely stuck? If I could just move this rock out of the way, everything would get better. Sam, how to track behavior change and long-term impact. Awesome. Stacy, we want to, let's see, there's a lot coming in. Having good, effective strategies, got it. Using different data sources and different systems. Oh yes, the lack of integration can be very painful. What else? How to engage colleagues in helping to measure and evaluate. Yes, absolutely. What else? The correlation over causation. Yeah. I want to talk about that in a second. That's a great one, Oren. What else? What else? Impact. How do we track impact? Absolutely. Okay, good. So here are a couple of things that I have found globally really are overcomplicating measurement and evaluation. So the first thing is that there are like 5 common models that we read about in LinkedIn posts, in our trusted L&D academic sources. And we hear about these 5 common models of measurement and evaluation. Does anyone, want to throw out there, what are those common models that we hear about over and over again? As you're putting those in chat, here's the thing. Kirkpatrick, yes. Allison, that's number 1. What are the others? There's 5 common, there can be some debate. Phillips model, ROI, yes, great. LTEM is sort of like there's a debate about LTEM and Cairo and a few others that are like 5th, but there's a couple more that are just talked about over and over again. What are we missing? Kirkpatrick, the ROI model. What else? What are those other common models we read about? People write about them all the time. Brinkerhoff, yes. The success case method. What else? We got 3. Having SMART goals, yes-ish. Kaufman, thank you. We got them. Smile sheets, LTEM. But so we have the 4, and then the 5th is a bit debatable. The LTEM model, the Cairo model, Anderson's value of learning model, but pretty much those are it. The reality is there's like 30 plus models out there. There's probably models that in my research, I haven't even encountered them yet. So the point is that these common models, they're not necessarily the right models to be using to help you measure and evaluate what it is that you want to measure and evaluate. It's kind of like trying to fit a square into a circle hole. How do you say that? Square hole, round peg, doesn't really mix, and it makes things really, really complex. So that's one of the biggest challenges for us in measurement and evaluation, is that we're given information about 5 common models, which maybe none of the 5 are the most appropriate for what you need to be doing. Thank you, Teresa. Absolutely. So that's the one. The second one that's a big challenge for us, in addition to everything else that you've all mentioned about challenges, is that there's so much information out there, and we don't have an organizing framework with all of our goals around measurement and evaluation. We don't know how to take the information, like all the articles that get written and people share stuff on LinkedIn and magazines and conferences that you speak at. How do we take the information like we're talking about today, and how do we use it in a meaningful way? A lot of times it's like, that was really nice. Cool, I'll put that in my knapsack of stuff that I might never do anything with. So what we really need is a way to take the information that's out there, and there's lots of it. Much of it is good, some of it's not, but much of the information is good. How do we apply it in a meaningful way? And so that's what we're going to start with today, is let's get an organizing framework for any, I call them learning interventions. I didn't say much about myself at the start, but I'm a former public health education intervention developer. My God, so many big words. So I used to basically have to prove that my education interventions were going to be effective for my target population before we even did any of the work in the community, because we were funded by governments and nonprofits and private philanthropists. We had to prove that what we did was going to work before we did it. And so that's why measurement and evaluation is really intuitive for me. But in corporate learning, we just like put stuff out there and hope for the best most of the time. And then we evaluate as an after effect. And that's really, really not working for us. So my suggestion is that anytime we develop any kind of learning intervention, we start with an organizing framework, something that I call a hypothesis. I'm a researcher. I can't help myself. So anytime that I do any kind of learning and development work, I have a hypothesis, what I call an organizing framework, which is like, why am I doing this? And so this, if you have a piece of paper, I would love for you to write this down. I'm going to put it on the board. So here's an organizing framework that I encourage you all to start using and use in the future, because it just helps keep you grounded in what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And it will help you then measure. And even better, it helps you to pick from the information that's out there so readily in the world and help you prove your hypothesis. So let's work this out, and this will make more sense. And maybe I can work with a volunteer too to solidify, how does this all come together? It's really quite simple. So your organizing framework when it comes to measurement and evaluation is, if X, then Y. So go ahead and write that down. If you have a notebook, I'm going to write it down here. If X, then Y. And hopefully, Stefan, my background is reading correctly. You're reading this? Okay, good. I never know. Okay, so what does this mean? If X, then Y. Essentially, as a simple example, and then we'll work with a few of you. If X is the easy one. X is your intervention. So let's call it your training. If learners participate in my training, then what? So this one, Y, is often what we call the KSA. You know, this is old school, original education details, your knowledge, skills, attitudes that are going to change. So some sort of KSA. And what we're building here is your chain of evidence. So here's one part of the chain of evidence. The next piece is the chain of evidence here is your change in sometimes behavior. Sometimes it's just knowledge if you're doing a certification program and people just need to increase their knowledge to be able to pass a test. Sometimes that's what we're working on. Sometimes it's affective. We need to get people to feel differently. We need to change their mindsets. Whatever it is for you, that should be really clear. These might be our learning objectives or our outcomes of people participating in training. So without these two things clear, we don't get to impact. Because the reality is, many of you wrote, why do we measure and evaluate? We want to demonstrate impact. But we can't go from participating in training all the way to impact without a really clear chain of evidence. And the next step of that is, what's the change that you intend to see with regard to knowledge, skills, or attitudes? Because that's what learning can immediately influence. If we don't see a relationship between these two things, we get no impact. We don't get to go to the next step. So what happens between here and here? Participants, they go to a training, they complete it. They should what? Usually we see an increase. We might see a decrease if we're trying to change behavior and decrease that behavior in some way. Or, heaven forbid, because it's a hypothesis, we don't know what happens with our learning programs until we prove it. Maybe there is no change. But those are our only possibilities. So what I'd like you to do now is, if you've got your piece of paper, pick a program that you're working on. So it's a leadership training, it's a policy knowledge training, like whatever your learning and development intervention is, what is that? And then you might have multiple knowledge, skills, or attitudes that you want to see changed. Just pick one, but you can do this if X, then Y for a variety of things for your program. And then tell yourself, and maybe me here in a minute, are we looking to see an increase in the thing, the KSA? Are we wanting a decrease in the thing? Or, well, there's always the option of neutral, but I don't think anybody wants the neutral option. But we have, as researchers, right, we're putting our research hats on, there's always the reality that maybe no change happens. That's not what we want, but maybe that's the reality. So does anybody have an if X, then Y they'd like to share? And maybe you can come on video and we can kind of talk through it really quickly. Any takers? Just want to make sure that it seems really simple, but let me tell you, it's the step number one before we can go any further with measurement and evaluation. Any takers? Feel free to raise your hand, put your if X, then Y in the chat. Just want to do a quick check-in and make sure this is resonating with folks. Interesting. Okay, great. So Delphine, yours is awesome. So you actually have examples of what looks to be an impact, but so communication skills would be your S of the KSA. The understanding of the digital economy would be a knowledge piece. And then it sounds like, and you're getting one step ahead, but that's okay, we're going there next. If people develop communication skills in the way that you imagine, if they have a better understanding of the digital economy, then they will probably get more successful offers of work. That's getting to your impact. So chain of evidence, right? If people participate in your program, they should see an increase in some sort of knowledge, skill, or attitude. And then is the impact. It's the so what. So for Delphine's example, so what? People have better communication skills. Why do we care? What's in it for them? What's in it for you as a business or as an organization? So then we get to move to the next part, which is the impact. And this is a great example. More work opportunities. Now, I can't promise to have great penmanship, but you get the idea. So now in our chain of evidence, we've got our third thing. And this can be broken into short term, and then longer term. So I know that when we talked about challenges, what are some of your challenges with measurement and evaluation? Some of you were like, hey, how do I show long-term impact? And it's a really important question. But when you work backwards, we can't get to long-term impact until we've got a super strong chain of evidence to go from participating in learning and development, changes in the immediate knowledge, skills, attitudes, and then that makes possible short-term outcome number one. That's like your immediate change or the immediate effect of somebody growing a certain KSA. And then you can go another level deeper, which is your longer term. So we have here short-term, I'm just going to say ST, your short-term outcomes. So what if people grow in their KSA? Short-term impact, we hope, it's a hypothesis, but we hope that they're going to get more job opportunities. Okay, that's fair. And then the longer term, which I'm going to say LT, what might that be? So now you have basically your organizing framework. This is just something that's holding you accountable to then deliver not only a learning experience that influences this, but you've also got a simple framework that allows you to do the next thing, which is prove it. This here is just our hypothesis, our chain of evidence. And if I write it a little bit deeper or a little differently or more simple, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 points. In our chain of evidence, we have 4 points here. One is simply completion rate. If people aren't completing your training, well, you don't get to go to the next one. Next one is what's the KSA that you're trying to influence? And we've got to show a relationship between that if people are participating in training, then they're seeing some sort of growth in the KSA that you intended. Then you have your short-term outcomes of that. If people, so we go back to the if X, then Y. If people grow in the KSA that you imagined, then what do you imagine would happen? They would get better job offers. They would, whatever is relevant. And then you can potentially go one step further with long-term outcomes. Now, you can also work backwards. So there's kind of a cheat way. I'm a researcher. Don't underestimate how helpful academic research can be, and you can get access to it at your public library or even local universities. Most of the time, long-term impact has already been established and is published and available somewhere. So a good example with leadership training, which is back to here, leadership training can influence a lot of different knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And then the short-term outcomes are more individual for your organization, your community, or whatever. But data is out there that says, hey, we've done a sample test of when students or when certain populations go through this type of training over time, because they have the resources to do these longer-term studies, over time, we see this long-term impact. So a sort of cheat is to do the research in advance that shows what other people have found between, soft skills training, communication training, leadership training. When certain things are developed, what does research say are the long-term impacts of that? And if you've got that data and you're using a similar sample in terms of your learners, you don't have to necessarily measure this yourself, but you do need these 3 things: completion rates, immediate changes in knowledge, skills, attitudes, and the immediate short-term outcome of that. So we've got some questions, and I don't want to ignore them before we do our next thing. So I'm going to go back up. So Delphine, thank you for sharing that example. That was awesome to talk us through that. And then Albert, after completing tools training, users will use the advanced features of a tool that will lead to enhanced communication with customers. That's a great one. So there's a tools training. That's your first part of the chain of evidence. Did they complete the tools training? Luckily, most of your technology will be able to give you those analytics on completion rates. The next one, that there'll be your learners will be using advanced features of a tool. And then the short-term outcome is that ideally they have enhanced communication with customers. So Albert, for you, you've got your organizing framework. Now your challenge or opportunity is prove it. So the next thing to be thinking about with this organizing framework is, what data do I need to be collecting to prove the relationship between these things? So number one, I've already told you, the completion rate data, you can usually get that, whether it's Zoom training, as simple as, tracking who showed up, activities that they complete, just making sure that people are doing the minimum viable work that's essential to get the change in the KSA. That's a pretty easy one, completion rate. But don't stop there. That's just the first step. So many people stop at tracking completion rates, and then they want to show these longer term and shorter term impacts. It doesn't work that way. We've got to show that next step, which is changes in skills or knowledge or that mindset, that affective piece. This is the challenging one, and this is where models are really helpful. So we'll go into the models piece. I have a quiz for you to take to get to your model in just a minute, but I want to work through some more of these questions. So Albert, hopefully that helped you. And this is for anyone else. Once you've got your clear hypothesis, if X, then Y, if X, then Y, great. Now your next step, prove it. What data do I need to prove the relationship between these things? Okay, let's see. What else is going on here? Albert, Amanda, if learners participate in my training, they will be capable of creating dashboards in Tableau. Great. That's awesome. That's a super specific skill. I love that. So Amanda, same thing to you. Prove it. What data do you need to collect to show that there is a clear relationship between completing your training and creating dashboards? And we'll get to some of the outside influences. We can also talk a little bit about what knowledge people already bring in. Some people already know how to create dashboards in Tableau. You don't want information that skews, but that's a whole other thing. We got to start here. This is what makes it simple. Get your organizing framework really clear. Marquieta, maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong. I apologize. If learners participate in an active listening workshop, then they will avoid misunderstandings and teamwork. Okay, great. Same question to you. What data do you need to prove that? And that's where you begin the measurement process. Next one, it makes me think that Y here is KSA, but I'm the bigger impact in the KPI. So yes, you're absolutely right in the sense that we have kind of an if X then Y dynamic. So if X here, which is your training, then Y is the KSA, and we do it again. If there's growth here in your KSA, then what happens? And you can do it again. If a short-term outcome is proven, then what long-term outcome? So yes, you can absolutely, I would say this here, your short-term outcomes are often business KPIs. So you're absolutely right that you could think of if X, then Y. What I'm saying is that we can't overlook the relationship between completing training, because a lot of times there's just issues in people completing the learning opportunity, and that if we don't address that, then we've got a skewed measurement or skewed results, if that makes sense. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll back up. Sam. Okay, wait, Nick. If learners participate in our leadership program, they will build fundamental knowledge on people and change, develop skills of coaching, the impacts that they work together through coaching to solve more issues. So this is a great hypothesis also, Nick. Same to you. What data do you need to collect to prove it? Okay, great. Awesome. So I think we get the idea here. The next big thing is, what data do we need to collect? And that is where measurement models come into play. I think sometimes we lean on Kirkpatrick or ROI to tell us this piece, or to tell us how to create our hypothesis. And my pushback is, before you go to adopt any model, get your organizing framework really, really clear, because then when you look to a measurement model, it becomes that much easier to go, oh, I could collect data in this way to demonstrate that people are using my technology tool at higher levels, right? So apply models only after you've got your organizing framework. That's another just thing I want everyone to do, hopefully now going forward. Get your if X then Y in these different data points, then turn to a model. So that being said, let's get you to your models. So Stefan, do you have the link or I? Yes, you do. Love that. Okay. So this is a quiz. It is going to ask you for your email after you answer the questions. The reason for that is because I have a specific email for every single person's result that will give you book resources, things to read, trainings to look at. So yes, I have your email. I will follow up with you once just to see how did you think about this training? How else can I help you? But mostly it's to give you resources. So please do input your email just to get the resources because they're awesome. Not to brag. And they don't come just from me. They come from like all the other people who are doing the work of measurement and evaluation, but they're specific to your model. And you can take this quiz multiple times and you'll get a different answer based upon the question.
Sorry, you're muted for a second. I do apologize.
My one request is when you finish the quiz, let us know. You can turn your camera on. Actually, we'd have to all be off. Like raise your hand or just put done in the chat, or how else can we do it?
In the timer, there's a thumbs up button they can hit.
Yes.
And yeah, we can keep the music off. That's fine too.
Yeah, hit the thumbs up button when you've done the quiz and you've gotten your results. Because what I want to do next is I'm going to screen share and I'm going to talk about the common models that have come up for you all in this group and what challenges they solve for. Because I want to help you make the connection between the model that you got and the challenge that you're likely experiencing. So we had one thumbs up. Anybody else done? Still working? Sometimes the quiz takes 30 seconds. Sometimes it takes 5. Nice, Stacy. That means you're using the right model. That means you're on the right track. Hopefully the resources that you get via email will help you to go a little bit deeper with what you're already doing. Great. Looks like can you put the, Liam, the quiz link is posted 2 chats above where your question was, and it's just a link. Awesome. It says bit.ly. Give a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to look at the results here.
As a kind reminder, those that are able to take the quiz, make sure to hit the thumbs up at the bottom so that we know that you're done. As soon as we got a few in, we'll move it forward.
Okay, great. It looks like most folks have, because I can see the data on the back end. It looks like most folks have completed it. Awesome, awesome. And so I'm going to share the results with you all. We have 3 top models, and one of them is the LTEM, the Learning Transfer Evaluation Model. That is I think it's Thallimer. If anybody has the pronunciation correctly, you let me know. But he's got an amazing model that essentially is like Kirkpatrick on steroids. We'll talk about the LTEM model and what it really helps with. The other models, and actually let me write this down. In fact, if it's okay with you all, I'm going to erase this. And then we'll write our common models down. So we've got LTEM. We've got the Cairo model. And we've got Anderson's value of learning. So what this tells me and you guys can give me a thumbs up if this resonates, is that many of you are probably evaluating one-time learning events. Anyone hand raises that this is you? I'm looking to evaluate a one-time learning event. No? Sort of. We have some head nods. Okay. And then these two are strategy. So how many of you are really interested in evaluating your learning strategy? Any hand raises? Well, now I can't see folks, but that, yes. Okay, good. So Anderson, if I'm going to work backwards, Anderson's model is only strategy. So if you got that, it's because you're really looking to get clear on, is our overall approach to learning and development in our organization actually influencing the business in whatever ways are meaningful or with whatever goals that you have. The Cairo model is really similar. It's another strategy model. The LTEM, there's two reasons that we might use the LTEM model. One is if you're looking to evaluate one-time learning events. The reason I like this model more than others is because, one, Dr. Thallimer has written a book on going beyond smile sheets. And so he has a lot of really great resources on evaluating one-time events in the best way possible. The other way to use the LTEM is to actually show the transfer of learning. So that might be the other thing, is that he's got 8 levels of data collection. And what's great about the model is he gives you really clear questions and things to think about. Because remember, back to our hypothesis and our organizing frameworks, once we get clear our if X then Y with the KSA, the short-term and the long-term outcomes, we need data to prove it. So the LTEM model will give us 8 levels of data to help us make that chain of evidence between completing training all the way through down to the transfer of training, and then maybe after that, some longer term impact. Yeah. Another great book that you might consider reading if the LTEM model came up for you, or if you're just interested in it after today, is called The 12 Levers of Learning. And if you've done any research on learning transfer, or you're just interested in it, this book is phenomenal. It's a really, really great book. Another amazing book for those of you who are interested in strategy. Oftentimes the problems that come when we're really interested in strategy is that we don't know how to tie learning to business results. That's a big challenge, is like, how do we show that relationship? And so one of the amazing books, and this model didn't come up with this group, but the book is super helpful. It's called Partner for Performance. I read it constantly, and they have amazing tools for helping you figure out, like, how do I do data collection strategies? Like, how do I create standards and track deltas? So if you're really interested in strategy, look at the resources, of course, that you got from these two models, but an overarching resource to help you pair my learning strategy to our business outcomes or community outcomes, whatever the work you're doing. This is a really great book for that. I wish I was getting referral bonuses from the authors, because this is how much I recommend it. But it's just an amazing book. And most people don't know about this model that they talk about in here, which is also a great strategy model. So that being said, I want to talk to you about one other challenge, and then we can open it up for whatever is coming up for you in terms of what can be additional resources or troubleshooting with measurement and evaluation. There's one more really important challenge that it's just great to talk about it. This is a space where we are all doing similar work with similar goals. And that is that the environment that we work in our organizations isn't always supportive of not only effective learning delivery, for one, but even being able to measure and evaluate. There's change. Change is happening so fast for many of us now, more so than even last year and the year before. Change is such a big part of our work environments that sometimes our measurement and evaluation strategies can't keep up. So one of the reasons I love, it's not here anymore, I'll go over here. One of the reasons I love this organizing framework is that it gives us the agility to reevaluate all the time. if the organization's goals have changed, if there's a merger acquisition, if there's a bunch of layoffs, like who knows, you're adopting a new technology tool that the whole organization now needs to have skills today, yesterday. What then is our organizing framework? If people complete a training, what's the immediate change in knowledge, skills, attitudes? Like use this framework anytime something changes, because what happens is it can help you to see, is the strategy that we implemented yesterday still work for where we're at today? And just to say that our environments will always be tricky. We don't always have stakeholder support. We don't always have the support of managers and other people and organizations to help us to get the data that we need. So if we have a super clear organizing framework, that's a really powerful tool to get people on board with, hey, we want to prove this. You've got data that can help us prove it. What do you think? Can we be partners in this? This organizing framework makes everything easier. So looks like we had a request for those 2 books. Awesome. Do we need that information, Stefan, or did that get put in there?
We'll make sure they get it after.
Okay, awesome. So we've got 10 minutes, and I know that there's a lot of questions. And there's so much more I could talk about in terms of like confounding variables. How do we control for other things that aren't just learning? We could talk about correlation over causation and how do we navigate that? So I'll just pause and be like, okay, what's a burning thing on your mind, or what's something that you want to dig in deeper from today's conversation that would be really helpful for you?
If you could, in the meantime, there's one question that was asked earlier. What are the top 5 learning measurement tools that you see? Because we've heard you name a few, just want to have a list of them.
Well, I'm cautious to give you the list of the 5 because they may not be what you need in terms of the goals that you're setting out. So just with a caveat, those 5 models may not be the most appropriate model, especially if you want to evaluate strategy, because some of those common models, they don't evaluate strategy. And so if you're trying to use Kirkpatrick, but what you really want to know is our overall learning strategy affecting the business in the ways that we want? Kirkpatrick's not going to help you with that necessarily. It might help you with one specific learning program, but they're really good at more tying like what behavior change. So if you want to change behavior, Kirkpatrick is awesome. And like, how do we design a program that does that? How do we collect data to prove it? But that being said, the 5 are Kirkpatrick, the LTEM model, which is like Kirkpatrick on steroids. I really prefer the LTEM model. Then we have the Kaufman model, which looks at impact. So it's basically looking at a merger of Kirkpatrick with the ROI influence plus the impact on society. That's what Kaufman does. He adds like a 5th layer of societal impact, where the ROI piece is looking at financial impact. And then Kirkpatrick is really looking at those short-term, it's not there anymore, but those short-term KSA changes and then the immediate short-term outcomes of those changes. Great. Chris, I'm a bit worried about how to build my hypothesis because in my organization, it seems one of the biggest challenges is that trainers are overloaded, but trainees are in fact happy with the information they are receiving. Yeah, that's Chris, a great example of environment. The last corporate job I had, we were told to create training at a pace that was very unrealistic, and we had absolutely no idea what people were doing with the training we developed. You can imagine how much fun that was. Not fun at all. So I'm sorry, Chris, for you being in that particular environment. It is definitely a challenging one. I would say that the best thing to do is, I like to think of training in terms of you have your flagship programs. So for some of you, that's onboarding. For some of you, it's a leadership program. For some of you, it's a technology training program. Whatever is your flagship program, like the thing that your department's known for, the thing that you want your department to be known for, the thing you get the most requests on, build your hypothesis for that flagship training, because at least it's the thing that you're doing more regularly, such that you can at least get some data to show how good you're doing with the program, how to improve it, and what some of those short-term and long-term impacts might look like. Chris, does that help at all? And it's not an easy place to be when you're overloaded. But our goal with measurement and evaluation is to show, are we being effective? Are we achieving our goals? And how can we improve what we're doing? Like someone mentioned feedback. I really appreciate getting feedback so we can improve. Yeah, we've got to set up measurement and evaluation strategies such that we can get that really valuable feedback. Great. What else? I see some other folks typing. While folks are typing, I want to share correlation versus causation, because it's a really big one that it comes up a lot. And I'm a researcher. I got trained as a researcher. I worked at a university for many, many years. And so it seems like the gold standard is we want to be able to prove causation. And love that question, Allison, about data collection. Let's definitely talk about that next. But back to correlation versus causation. If our goal is just to continuously improve and to see if what we're doing is effective, we don't need causation data. We're not working for governments where we're trying to get FDA approval for certain drugs and we have to control for all of these things. All we really want, truthfully, in our education sector is to be able to show a strong relationship. Remember back to my points here, the 1, 2, 3, 4. We just want to show a relationship between these variables. And in some cases, there are other important variables that we also want to track. So maybe somebody is doing a leadership training and we're trying to change mindset, but maybe that person already had that mindset. So we need to be able to track what our learners bringing to the table so that we can show growth that's responsive and accountable for the diversity of skills, knowledge, perspectives that people bring in the room. That's a simple example. But there are some things when we look at relationships between our chain of evidence, we might need to show other variables and how they're influencing so that we can prove that we have a strong relationship between all those things. And that's really our goal, a strong relationship. So Albert, actually, let's go back to Allison with the EU and the data collection stuff. So I'm going to caveat and say I am not doing work in the EU, but I'm very well aware of the data collection challenges. And one thing that could be really interesting just to consider adopting, and I don't know if this is a helpful strategy for you to address the data limitations, but one of the things I found works really, really well is to build data collection opportunities into the flow of the learning experience. So we use polls, for example, to get to know what's happening in a group. That's a strategy, that's an icebreaker, but also is a really easy opportunity for data collection. So I strategically will build in, I use rubrics to then let people self-report on how well they're using the skill that I've taught them. And then it helps me to troubleshoot where are people getting stuck or stopped. But I'm also collecting relevant information that helps me show growth with certain skills that I'm teaching. So Allison, I don't know if embedding strategic opportunities to collect data on how people are thinking, their confidence levels, their self-reports on how they're doing or using a skill or a tool, that might be one workaround because it's part of the learning experience and you can collect the data anonymously, but you're using it as a way to give valuable feedback to people inside of the learning. So maybe that's kind of a workaround. Or maybe it has absolutely nothing to do with the real core challenges of data collection, and that's also possible too. Great, Nick, thank you. Got it. So Albert, another great question. How do you go about analyzing great amounts of qualitative data? So this is a super awesome question. And one of the things, I'm actually literally writing a chapter on the book about this right now, is how do we make our questions, how do we craft questions and answers to questions in such a way that it makes it easier for us to analyze the data in the end? So the simple solution is, how can we take some of the questions that we intuitively want to collect qualitatively? How can we reduce the number of those qualitative responses and translate them into quantitative, because it makes it easier? And it's, Albert, it's up to you and your team to figure out what absolutely must be qualitative data. But my guess is that there's probably, let's say, of 10 questions, if they're all qualitative, probably 50% of those questions could be turned into a quantitative, question that would make it easier for you to analyze the data. And then the follow-up of the qualitative question gives you even better insights, perhaps because of the previously asked close-ended questions. So that's one way to help simplify that. The other thing would just be to get a really awesome tool that helps you to find themes and track themes, which I used in Vivo when I was in grad school. But there's also tools like using word clouds and using thematic analysis inside of different learning experience platforms that allow you to find themes really quickly. And I have a recommendation for one if you absolutely can't get away from the qualitative stuff. And yes, Allison, AI is very good at pulling themes so long as you have the right technology tool to put that data into. So, if you need suggestions on that, I'm happy to help there. We have 16 seconds left. I hope this conversation was awesome and gave you some things to think about. Stefan, any last words in the 5 seconds we have left? Yay,
I would simply say an applause. Thank you so much, Alaina, for this very insightful guest lecture here. There is so much more that I am picking up on. It's like, hey, I'm just starting in this scene for measurement and evaluation, and there's so much I need to learn and so much that I can learn, let alone the experts here we have already. Alaina is going to be available to you in different capacities. You can run through the similar workshop again with her sometime later. There's an opportunity to meet with her in person, online, or actually in person. Who knows? If you're in the neighborhood, we'll make sure to put this recording online. Send the details of the books and the questions and the answers. And if you still have any questions, put them in the chat. We'll make sure that Alaina gets to them and gets to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming back for the change in the hour. I really appreciate that, and I hope to continue engaging with you all on LinkedIn. So hope to see you there.